Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unexpected Goals. This is your Champions League Match Week 4 preview. And boy, do we have a slate coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm most excited, though, because we have two big time heavyweight clashes between Liverpool hosting Real Madrid and PSG hosting Bayern Munich, which should tell us a lot about both of those teams. For this podcast, I know when I did Champions League Match Week 1, I did all 18 matches. For time's sake, I am only going to do 10 of the 18 matches. So the matches that I'm going to pass over, if you don't want to listen to this, you're like, oh, I'm not talking about your team. Slavia Prague, Arsenal, Atletico Union, St. Gilloise, Bodo Glimt versus Monaco, Olympiacos versus PSV, Tottenham versus Copenhagen, Pafos versus Villarreal, Qarabag versus Chelsea, and then Inter versus Kairat Almaty. Just for time's sake, I don't want this to go an hour and a half. And to be honest, I, along with probably a lot of you, don't really care much about Pafos or Qarabag or Kairat Almaty. So it's best maybe to just pass over and not talk about them. So let's just dive right in. I'm going to go in chronological order here. We're going to start though first on Tuesday. Excuse me, one second. Excuse me. On Tuesday, we're going to start with Liverpool and Real Madrid. Um, I think there's so many interesting aspects of this match, and I think the biggest thing for Liverpool, they got back on track, beating Aston Villa 2-0. They were good in the match. They did a really good job defensively in limiting Aston Villa. But I think the most interesting aspect of this match is how effective is Liverpool playing out of the back. I cannot express this enough. The job that Xabi Alonso has done with Real Madrid out of possession, specifically with their high press, has been remarkable. If you go back to the Club World Cup when they played PSG, PSG just exploited them over and over and over again. They overloaded, and Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. were not great in the press up front, but he has completely turned everything around. And if you go watch that Barcelona match compared to that PSG match at the Club World Cup, it is a night and day difference. Real Madrid pressed Barcelona high. They forced a ton of high turnovers. In the end, 33 danger zone losses against one of the best build-up teams in the world. And this is also available on my YouTube, I should say, if you want to watch this in video format, because I'm going to reference a couple pictures here. But I want to show you a picture here from about 6 minutes in against Barcelona. I mean, look at this. Everybody is jumping from the left back to Housen to everybody is marked up man to man, and they're forcing Barcelona to either go long or try to play through them. And more often than not, if teams are going to play long against Real Madrid, they're physical enough to win a lot of those duels, as they've been over the years. But now they're forcing a lot of high turnovers. I mean, I mentioned this, in one of my Substack write-ups, but when they faced Marseille in the very first Champions League match, they forced 16 high turnovers. I can't remember a team forcing more than 15 high turnovers in a match of any match in that, for that matter. So the job that he has done with the high press has been incredible. But they're also very good at sitting back in a mid block. When they played Barcelona, they went with more of a man-to-man concept, and I think that's what Liverpool has to really do here if they want to be effective. They have to exploit the man-to-man marking system. And what that means is a lot of teams like Arne Slot has said, is that a lot of teams are just kind of sitting back on them. A lot of teams are also, from when Liverpool is out of possession, a lot of teams are just going long against them. So when Liverpool has the ball, I think they can kind of go back to what they had previously last season, which was a very mixed style of a team that can play direct and also a team that can play out of the back. So I think in this match, it really comes down to, how effective is Liverpool exploiting those man-to-man matchups against Real Madrid? Because, those are very difficult, and Barcelona really couldn't find a way through that either. And, I mean, you can't say enough about the job that Karras did. Karras, I believe I mispronounced his name. The Real Madrid left back did, going 1v1 against Humal against El Clasico. I mean, it was just incredible. Real Madrid created 3.6 expected goals in that match. So now the flip side of that is Liverpool, from an out of possession standpoint, we've seen this time and time again, right? They are getting exploited in behind because their press isn't good enough. I'm going to show you a couple images here. So this is from their match against Brentford. Yenalt here is not getting pressured on the ball, which allows Sade to just go 1v1 against Connor Bradley there at right back and just get in behind, and it ends up creating a huge chance. Well, let's go take the screenshot from Real Madrid's match and their first goal that Mbappe scored against Barcelona. He just makes a run off the back line, and Barcelona is not closing down the ball. So if Liverpool is not able to close down the ball and their press is not as good as it's pretty much been all season long, Real Madrid's going to exploit them time and time and time again in behind. So, and if they don't, well, then they'll just use a lot of concepts like overload to isolate, where they'll just build out and they'll overload one side of the pitch and they'll just fire one to the opposite side. And to be frank, I don't think Liverpool has fullbacks right now that can defend. I don't think Kirkez is that good of a defender. If they want to start Frimpong on the right back side, I mean, Xabi Alonso knows he's not a good defender, so he's going to try to exploit him as much as possible. So I think that if Real Madrid comes with the exact same tactical plan that they had against Barcelona in El Clasico, I think they're going to walk away with 3 points out of here at Anfield. I still think Liverpool is not that good, and I think Real Madrid, from what the improvements they've made out of possession, I think are going to get them 3 points here at Anfield. All right, let's go to the other big match: PSG and Bayern Munich. So PSG, for their standards, I think has had a little bit of a bad run of form. They've drawn three out of their last four Ligue 1 matches. The underlying numbers have not really been that impressive at all. If you look at this season domestically, they have a plus 0.64 XG differential per 90 minutes. Last season, they finished at 1.69, so they're a full goal worse. I know it's early on in the season, we've only played 10 matches, but that is a decent enough sample size to say, hey, maybe something's a little bit wrong. Now, they've obviously dealt with a lot of injuries. Dembele was out for a long time. Desiree Doué is going to be out for more time now because I believe he got hurt against Lorient. But I think teams are just sitting back against them in a low block and they're cutting off space to the middle. And the biggest struggle that I've seen with PSG is that because teams are denying space to the middle, what do they usually do? Well, they get the ball out wide to their wingers and they allow them to just go 1v1 and they usually beat them. Well, that's just not really happening this season. Last season in Ligue 1, PSG had a 45.4% successful take on percentage. That was third best. This season, that has dropped all the way down to 36.2%. That is dead last in Ligue 1. So that what that's telling me is that their wingers just aren't beating guys off the dribble 1v1. And that's a big problem because that's the whole point of the Enrique system. It's that we have these amazing wingers and we have all these guys we are trying to overload and play through the middle. And if we can't do that, then we have those 1v1s out wide. And if you're not winning those, then, well, you can't really break down low blocks. Now, these two met in the Club World Cup, and PSG was lucky to get past Bayern. I know you can look at the final XG and you can say, well, no, PSG had like 1.9 and Bayern had 0.6. No, PSG struggled building out of the back for most of the match. It was one of their worst build-up performances they had all last season. This is per Mark stats. In that Club World Cup, PSG won the match 2-0, but had 37 danger zone losses. That was the most they had all last season compared to when they beat Arsenal 2-1 in the second leg of the Champions League semifinals when they had 36 danger zone losses. And if you remember, both of those meetings against Arsenal, they were not good in build-up, and they actually struggled. And if you want to go look at the final XG, I can show you how badly Arsenal actually should have gone to the Champions League final. Bayern Munich is a really good pressing team. They have forced the second most high turnovers in the Champions League so far. They'll aggressively go man to man, and I think it's going to work out very similarly to how it did during the summer. Now, some interesting things are happening with Bayern Munich. They are what I would say, the most dominant possession team in the world right now. Vincent Kompany last season had it's weird. He did a 2-4-4 buildup, which created a rest defense around and just pinned opponents inside the final third. This season, he's took it a step further and gone even more aggressive. And I think I know the reason why. He's switched to a 2-2-6, which has really put a lot of pressure on opponents in the final third, because what it does is it allows you to create this box midfield where you can play through the middle of teams. But also, when you push six guys up to the last line of defense, there are very few teams that are actually going to be able to defend those type of overloads. And what happens typically is because Bayern has amazing wingers like Luis Diaz and Michael Olise, well, you can double up out wide and get 2v1s and allow those wingers to just torch the opposing fullbacks. So it's allowed Bayern to be so good. And also, Harry Kane has just been in the form of his life. He drops deep more in build-up now. He's connecting more of the play, which I think is good because, he's obviously an incredible target man. But when you drop him deep and you force defenders to come out and, defend him in these deep areas instead of just putting him in the middle of the box as a number 9, it allows him to run onto the ball a little bit more. It allows him to create a little bit more space for himself. This season, he's got 22 goals in 14 matches, even though he's being used heavily in those deep build-ups. PSG, they've been poor defensively recently, and I have a feeling they're going to struggle to cope with not only the buildup of Bayern Munich, but also the physicality of them. Bayern's not only going to likely dominate possession here, they're probably going to tilt the field on PSG, just like they did in the Club World Cup. And they have a massive size advantage on set pieces. Bayern have already scored 6 goals directly from set pieces in the Bundesliga. And if you watch PSG against some of the better set piece offenses in the Champions League last season, specifically against Arsenal over the two legs, they really struggled because they're short and they're not as big as a lot of these other teams. So I really like Bayern Munich in this matchup, even though they're on the road. I think they've got a great chance of getting 3 points here in Paris. All right, let's go look at other matches on Tuesday. Napoli and Frankfurt. Napoli has been bad offensively in the Champions League. I mean, to be fair, they had two red cards that combined for them playing a full 90 minutes down. But with that being said, 2.2 expected goals in their 3 matches against Manchester City, Sporting, and PSV. One of the problems with them offensively right now is they're just getting no production from their front line. Anguissa and Kevin De Bruyne have 8 of Napoli's 16 Serie A goals. Of the 3 of their 16 goals, only 3 of their 16 goals have come from forwards that just can't continue if you're going to defend a Serie A title and if you're going to progress in the Champions League. Kevin De Bruyne is likely going to miss this match due to injury, which puts even more pressure on their front line, more pressure on Rasmus Højlund to produce, which he has been pretty decent. He just hasn't played in that many matches. But this is about as good an opponent as they can ask for because Frankfurt is a horrible defensive team. They had a good showing over the weekend against St. Pauli, but if you can get out in transition or get set piece opportunities, you will score. That's exactly how Liverpool did, scored their first 3 goals against Frankfurt in the last Champions League match. And Frankfurt is really struggling on set pieces between Bundesliga and the Champions League. They've already conceded 10 goals directly from set pieces. If you know anything about Antonio Conte teams, they're always good on set pieces. They've already scored 7 this season. So big advantage, I think, here for Napoli, and I have a good chance for them to get back on the right track here in the Champions League at least. Frankfurt, on the other hand, all 3 of their matches in the Champions League ended 5-1, which I think is very funny. And Napoli's, I mean, they were terrible defensively against PSV. They lost 6-2. It was the first time ever, and I thought this was an interesting stat. First time ever that an Antonio Conte team had conceded 6 goals in a match. Their defensive numbers in Serie A, they're allowing 1.24 XG per 90 minutes, when last season they only allowed 0.78. So there has been a pretty big dip for Napoli defensively. And if you watch their last 2 matches against Inter and PSV, I mean, you'll see they're just way more open. They're getting hit in transition more frequently, more than any other Conte team that I've seen. Per Opta, Napoli has allowed 13 fast break shots. That's the most in Serie A. That just doesn't typically happen under an Antonio Conte team. You know, Frankfurt did have some success playing through Liverpool, I thought, but I thought they were just very poor in the final third. And eventually, as the match went on and Liverpool got ahead, they just had to play more direct. And that's primarily the type of team they are. They play direct and they play in transition. So, you know, this might actually be a decent match for them against Napoli, who has been struggling to defend in those transition moments. But we all know Frankfurt, if you don't know by now, is overperforming like crazy. They've scored 26 goals between the Bundesliga and Champions League from 15.1 expected goals. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was a really high scoring match. You know, you typically don't see that with Conte teams, but hey, every Frankfurt match just seems to just get completely out of hand. All right, Juventus and Sporting. Tudor's reign is over. Went out with a whimper. 7 match winless run. His time is up. Didn't improve Juventus from when he took over from Thiago Motta. So that means, Luciano Spalletti is back in at the helm of Juventus. What he will need to drastically improve is this Juventus offense for the better part of 2 years, whether it be Mata or Tudor, has just not been very good, despite having a lot of talent. This season, Juventus is only averaging 1.21 non-penalty expected goals per 90 minutes in Serie A. They have the 4th worst XG per shot. What Spalletti did a great job with, both Napoli and the Italian national team over the last 4 years, is really turning those teams into possession dominant teams that can tilt the field and also create chances. He'll have to transform Juventus back into that. You know, Juventus under Thiago Motta was a team that tried to overload through the first couple phases of buildup, but never really tilted the field and dominated possession and created much once they got in the final third. Then you go to Tudor, he tried to make them a little bit more direct, didn't really work out. So now what Spalletti has to do is he's got to figure out a way to blend those two styles and somehow make it work. They were, I mean, when he was at Napoli, they were the most possession dominant team in Serie A. He gave his teams freedom in attack to play a less rigid system. So that's kind of what Juventus is going to have to be. They have to be less rigid and they have to have a little bit more freedom to get on the ball, allow their players to move around and try to get to the level of an above average offensive team. I mean, you think about it, Juventus during the, 2010s, I mean, they won 9 straight Serie A titles. Like they were incredibly dominant for so long. And now suddenly they're just like a middle of the road offense, despite having so much talent. Sporting is a very good defensive team. Like it's not going to be easy. They've conceded 5 goals domestically and only 2.1 expected goals in 3 Champions League matches. So, it's going to take some time here for Juventus to get back on track and get to be one of the more elite offenses in Serie A. And they're probably going to struggle here early on. But I think Spalletti is the right hire to get Juventus to that next level. And what he's done, from an out of possession standpoint as well, is his Napoli teams they always pressed very aggressively high up the pitch, which is something Juventus didn't do under Mata, but they did do under Tudor, and especially this season, they've really improved their press. They're second in Serie A right now in passes per defensive action. They've already forced 30 high turnovers in 3 Champions League matches. And Sporting's just been really bad offensively. They scored twice in the second half against Marseille when they were playing up a man. But when it was 11v11, they took 5 shots and created 0.25 expected goals. Then against Napoli, they only created 0.3 expected goals from open play. And their 2 biggest matches domestically against Porto and Braga, they've only created a total of 2.4 expected goals. They'll beat up on all the lower tier teams in Portugal, but any team that can press them and force them to go long, they're going to struggle. So I think this is going to be a very, very low scoring match. Juventus I think is going to improve offensively eventually under Spalletti, but I mean he just got hired on the 30th, so we're so short into his tenure here. All right, that does it for Tuesday's matches. On to Wednesday. Let's go Ajax and Galatasaray. This is a weird match. I'll be honest. I didn't know if I really wanted to break this down, but I found it very weird and but also very interesting at the same time. John Hedinga, who is in charge of Ajax right now, is not doing a great job. They got an early red card against Chelsea in their previous Champions League match, so they eventually lost 5-1. So you can play an excuse there, but I'm going to show you an image here. This is from 11tgen11 on Twitter. This is Ajax's pass map from their match over the weekend against Heerenveen. What's going on here? Just a bunch of passes back and forth to the center back. There's no connection of the play, in between the lines here. They're just like hopeful for direct balls up to their forwards. Like what's going on? And then you see that they only created, barely over 1 expected goal against them. I mean, oh boy. And even if even if you go back, like, their 3-2 win over 20 recently, they only created 0.8 expected goals off of 9 shots. And what Hedinga had tried to do, he was the caretaker manager when after Eric Ten Hag, I think it was. Excuse me. It was they hired Ten Hag, then they hired somebody else. They fired him, and then he was in charge for like the second half of that season. But when he was there, and what he's trying to do this season is he's trying to blend some type of build up and direct style of play, but it's just not working. I mean, Galatasaray is going to be as aggressive as possible. They're going to press them, and they're going to force Ajax to play direct. And if we look at that pass map from the previous match, that didn't go well. So, I mean, I don't think Ajax is really prepared to deal with that type of pressure. Now, for Galatasaray in possession, I mean, this is a fantastic matchup because Ajax can't defend right now. I mentioned that they beat 23-2 in the Eredivisie, but they conceded 2.7 expected goals in that match, and got outshot 21-9. Like, this is Ajax we're talking about. They're supposed to be the most dominant team in the Netherlands. So, in their last 5 matches, Ajax has conceded 12 expected goals. I mean, Galatasaray is a nightmare to defend if you're struggling to defend in transition and defend direct balls. I mean, they beat Bodo Glimt 3-1 in their previous match, created 3.8 expected goals while only holding 39% of the ball. I mean, their style of play under Burak has been just as aggressive as possible in possession. Once you get the ball, let's try to pick guys out. Let's try to switch the play. Let's try to do whatever we can to get the ball moving forward as quick as possible. So if you're a team like Ajax that can't really defend that and are struggling to defend in transition, this is a great match for Galatasaray, and I think they're going to hammer them. Benfica versus Leverkusen. A bit of a worry for Benfica in the Champions League so far when they've had to face elite pressing teams. Last two matches against Chelsea and Newcastle, all they did was just consistently turn it over on their own side of the pitch. So I'm going to show you an example from the Newcastle match. So Newcastle, you can see here going man to man, pressing high. They forced Benfica to play kind of a looping ball up to one of the forwards. Uh, Newcastle comes down with it. They're able to make one pass, turn, uh, get in behind, and then Anthony Gordon just simply beats his man to the penalty box, and it's a goal. So you combine those two matches against Chelsea and Newcastle, Benfica created only zero point 0.4 expected goals. I keep saying Benfica. Somebody got mad at me a long time ago, just saying it's Benfica. I keep adding an I in between it, so I apologize. But by now, if you've listened to me long enough, you know I can't pronounce anything. So the question here for Leverkusen is, I guess, can they effectively press Benfica high the same way that Chelsea and Newcastle were able to do? I don't know about that. I mean, currently Leverkusen is 11th in the Bundesliga in danger zone losses forced and 7th in passes per defensive action. They conceded 7 goals against PSG, but that was also because of an early red card. However, over the weekend, Leverkusen did hold Bayern Munich to 1.12 xG from open play. They're a very solid mid-block team, so I think that even though they don't really effectively press high, I think they'll have some success limiting Jose Mourinho's side. But the key for Leverkusen offensively in this match is they need to do exactly what Newcastle did to Benfica, which was just hit them when they're out of position. Because if you know a Jose Mourinho team, if they can just slink back and set up in a very structured defensive block, they're going to be incredibly difficult to break down. What Leverkusen is trying to do under Hjulmand is just hit teams in transition over and over. They want to play as direct as possible and put a big emphasis on counterattacks. Before their match against Bayern on Saturday, they were leading the Bundesliga with 16 fast break shots and 3 goals directly from fast breaks. Because of that effectiveness in transition, they have an XG per shot of 0.14, which is one of the best marks across Europe's Type 5 leagues. And outside of the Newcastle match, though, for Benfica, nobody really has been able to create much against Jose Mourinho's side. So it simply comes down for Leverkusen here is like if they can get Benfica out of position, if they can hit them in transition, then they can beat them. But it should be a very interesting match. All right, Club Bruges against Barcelona. I mean, it's the same story with every team that faces Barcelona is can you take advantage of the high line? Real Madrid were able to do that in El Clasico. They punished Barcelona over and over again. Club Bruges came out of the gates hot. You know, they beat Monaco 4-1, but their last two matches, they got drilled by Atalanta and Bayern Munich. I mean, Bayern Munich match was particularly bad, not just because they conceded 4 goals and 4.1 expected goals, but they were only able to muster 5 shots with a total XG of zero point 0.4, I believe it was, or 0.1, 0.2, somewhere in there. It was bad. The point is, this is bad. So Nicky Hayen, who's been the manager of Bruges since the beginning of last season, lost a lot of key players in the summer, and they just don't near have the talent that they had last season when they made the round of 16. They will likely try to play more direct in this match because Barcelona is going to press them very aggressively in a man-to-man fashion. And there were times, specifically last season against Atalanta, where they were able to drop forwards in deep and create overloads, and especially also against Aston Villa too. But Barcelona's center backs are going to follow them wherever they go, and they're going to be as aggressive as possible. So those overloads probably aren't going to happen. So Bruges is going to have to play a lot very direct, over the top, and try to take advantage of Barcelona's high line. And if they're able to do that and they're able to make runs in behind, of course, any team has a chance against Barcelona. But the key is you got to be able to actually play direct because Barcelona, what they try to do because of that high line, they're trying to stop the attacks at their source, right? So they're trying to turn you over high, really, really deep up the pitch, or when they force you to play long, you're not able to actually time those runs, and they can get you off sides or they can be able to easily defend a lot of those direct balls, right? So it's being able to find that release, timing those runs perfectly. If they're able to do that, Bruges might have a chance here. Barcelona, some injury things going on with them. Lewandowski and Olmo are back, which is obviously huge for Barcelona. Pedri is now out. Rafinha is still out. And something to monitor also is Lamine Yamal has been nursing a groin injury for a long time. I know he played 88 minutes against Elche over the weekend, but I just wouldn't be surprised if one of these matches he maybe actually gets rested. I mean, there had been talk that he might need surgery on it, which I know Barcelona does not want it to have happen. Um, but Bruges is going to sit in a mid block. They're probably going to play a back five, would be my guess. They have been playing a back four typically throughout most of this season, but when you're playing Barcelona, you're going to get overloaded. So, I mean, it really just comes down to, Bruges is going to try to clog up the middle. Barcelona's going to have Rashford out wide, and they're going to have most likely Yamal out on the right as well. So it's how effective are those guys going to be in 1v1s? Yamal got shut down against Real Madrid, but that's obviously not the norm. He's almost an impossible guy to stop. So, if the indication of what happened to Bruges against Bayern Munich is anything, I mean, they're going to struggle here, likely against Barcelona. All right, Manchester City against Dortmund. Manchester City, resounding win over Bournemouth on Sunday because they took advantage of Bournemouth's aggressiveness. Most teams are just trying to sit back on City this season, sit in low blocks, and really just try to deny space to the middle, not allow Pep Guardiola's team to have a midfield overload, right? Some teams have had success, some teams haven't. Most teams are trying to cover Haaland as much as possible, although he just keeps scoring over and over again. But the point is that City really hasn't had the luxury of having space, but they had space against Bournemouth on Sunday. And the first goal I want to show you came because Diakite was pushed way too far up the pitch trying to mark Haaland, which allowed him to make a run behind. So Foden flicked the ball here to Cherki, and Haaland just simply beat Diakite in behind, and Cherki played a header, and Haaland was in and he scored the opening goal. The second goal was the exact same story. Here, City created a central midfield overload, and Sensi, the left center back, stepped out to try to close down Foden. Well, Foden made a pass to Cherki here, who played a ball in behind to the vacated space of where Haaland was. And you can see Truffert on the left side here just wasn't really communicating with his defensive line and was able to easily play Haaland on side. So I show these because these are the type of situations where they can exploit Dortmund. Dortmund under Kovac is a more of a mid-block team rather than a team that will relentlessly press high. They will play a higher line to try to limit that space in between the lines and not allow City to have these type of midfield overloads. So these type of scenarios are the situations where City can actually be effective. Dortmund this season has been good defensively, outside of a match against Bayern Munich, one which I thought they dominated the second half, and then the crazy 4-4 match against Juventus. They've been very solid defensively. They've only allowed 0.98 expected goals per 90 minutes in the Bundesliga, and they've kept a clean sheet in 6 of their 9 matches domestically as well. But with that being said, if you go through all of their matches under Kovac, last season and this season, when they play against elite teams like Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Real Madrid, etc., they've gotten exposed time and time again. So I would not be surprised to see Manchester City hang 2-3 goals, similar to what they did against Bournemouth on Sunday. For City out of possession, I still think they have problems. I know they limited Bournemouth to 0.72 xG, but I still think they get easily exploited. And that's just because the midfield that Pep keeps rolling out there. I mean, he rolled out Cherki, Silva, Doku, and Foden. There's just not any ball winning. So now you're putting all your pressure on Nico and Gonzalez or Rodri, who is still, still recovering from his injury. That's just not going to work long term for Manchester City. There are too many good transition teams that are going to exploit them, and their back line is nowhere near as elite as it's been in years past. I mean, Bournemouth almost scored inside the first minutes by turning City over high, but it was called offsides. And I think that's the big thing here is, City's going to aggressively press, whether it be high, similar to Barcelona, they want to try and stop all the attacks at their source. And they're also having a couple of tricky things going on here because teams are just, I mean, if you listen to the podcast the Premier League episode, I talked about how Aston Villa was able to just build out of the back and play right through them, right? Well, there are options for teams to play direct against City as well, and specifically with the fullbacks, because Pep is their fullbacks are caught in this like, do we push up and actually press the opponent's fullbacks, or do we sit back? Because if they go up and press, then teams just are playing balls over the top and they're exploiting City that way. If they don't press, well, then they have an overload through the first phase. So City are kind of in a little in-between situation right now. And Dortmund's a very good transition team. Like, they're a very good team at playing direct. They can obviously play out of the back very effectively, but Kovac has kind of blended both styles this season because they're good in transition. They have an XG per shot of 0.13, which is third best in the Bundesliga behind Bayern Munich and Leverkusen. And Girassi especially has one of the best XG per shots in all of Europe at 0.12. So with Manchester City trying to aggressively press them high, it's going to come down to a lot of these 1v1 matchups for Dortmund, which I think I really like their chances here. So, you know, it could be a very high scoring match, but ultimately I think City does win it. But Dortmund certainly is not going to get blown out, I don't think. All right, all right, let's see. Marseille and Atalanta. Fascinating match here because, Atalanta under Juric has been a little bit different this season. Typically Juric is a man-to-man high press, very similar to Gasperini, but he has decided to have his Atalanta team sit back in more of a mid-block this season. If you look through Atalanta's pressing numbers, they only have 87 pressed sequences in Serie A. That's sixth lowest. 52 high turnovers. That's in the bottom half of Serie A. So you see that and you're like, oh gosh, like, are they not going to be able to press Marseille high? Because there's two different ways to beat Marseille. Either you just go full on man to man press against De Zerbi and you try to beat him at its source, or you just sit back in a low block and you say, De Zerbi, try to break us down, because people know that De Zerbi's teams are typically not very good at breaking down low blocks. Marseille has been struggling recently. Also, there were a couple red cards, to be fair, but 3.1 expected goals in their last four matches. And over the weekend against Auxerre, they only took six shots before getting a red card in the 65th minute, I might add. But Atalanta defensively this season, though, because they're playing more of the mid block, because they've sat back a little bit, they've been one of the best defenses across Europe. They have only allowed 7.2 non-penalty expected goals in their 10 Serie A matches. They're allowing an XG per shot of 0.07. They are allowing the longest average shot distance of 20.2 yards. That's the longest of any team in Europe's top five leagues. They play out of a 3-4-3. They'll drop five guys into the back when they're playing out of possession in this match. They're going to make it very difficult for Marseille. So I would not be surprised to see Marseille really struggle in this match. On the flip side, Atalanta has played more direct this season. They've struggled a little bit more building out of the back. Two things that have happened. Number one, last season they had the best field tilt in Serie A at 65.3%. This season that's dropped down to about 57%, despite holding the same amount of possession. Their danger zone losses have increased from 20.6 last season to 23.8 this season. And it's just because Atalanta is playing a little bit more direct and they're just struggling a little bit more to build out of the back. You look at Marseille, De Zerbi teams are always very aggressive and pressing high, and they've been very effective with their high pressing this season. 22 shots generated directly from 89 high turnovers in Ligue 1. In the Champions League, 7 shots generated from 19 high turnovers. So when they turn opponents over high, they are hitting them quickly and they are getting shots off of them. One of the best teams at doing that across Europe. And the defensive performances for Marseille haven't really been that bad. They've had two bad matches, once against Lyon when they got a red card in the 29th minute, and then in their first Champions League match against Real Madrid, but they kept turning the ball over high, and that's why Real Madrid got a lot of their chances. The other 11 matches this season, they have only allowed 1.03 XG per 90 minutes. So I think both of these teams, honestly, are going to struggle offensively, and it's probably going to be a lower scoring match than you'd expect. All right, final match, Newcastle versus Bilbao. If you like pressing, this is the match for you. Bilbao has the most press sequences in Serie A. They've forced 95 high turnovers this season. Their press has been so effective, it's made it very difficult for anybody really to create chances against them, because they're just stopping every team in their own final third and not allowing them to. And when they do, teams try to play over the top against them. They're very physical and they're very good at winning those 1v1s. They're only allowing 0.86 XG per 90 minutes in La Liga, and in their 3 Champions League matches, despite conceding 7 goals, they have only allowed 2.9 expected goals. And, even though their press is really effective, when they do get pushed back into the final third, they're very well drilled at sitting in a 4-4-2 and denying space for the middle. You saw that against Arsenal. I mean, if you really think about it, how did Arsenal actually score their opening goal? Because they weren't really creating much. It was a one ball over the top that played Gabriel Martinelli in behind for a 1v1 with the goalkeeper. Outside of that, Arsenal didn't really do much before they scored that goal. That is exactly how Newcastle is going to have to try to hit Bilbao in this match. I mean, Newcastle is a fantastic transition team, but when they face low blocks, what often happens is they try to switch the play, they try to move the ball from side to side, and just fire crosses into the box. Bilbao is a very physical team, very good. They can handle the wrestling match with Newcastle in the box, which very few teams can. So this is not the best matchup for Newcastle, especially a team like Bilbao that won't really allow them to play in transition. Now, Newcastle has established defensively as one of the best, established again as one of the best pressing teams in the entire world. They have been very selective with their press more than years past, but when they do jump into a man-to-man press, I mean, there are very few teams that can play through them. Per Mark Stats, Newcastle is leading the Premier League in dangers and losses forced. And this matchup is very similar to the one Arsenal had against Bilbao, in which the Gunners simply just did not allow Bilbao to play at the back. They forced them to play direct, and they won most of their duels. Almost two-thirds of Bilbao's passes in that match against Arsenal were either medium or short because they just could not play out of the back and they couldn't play through Arsenal's press. In the end, in that match against Arsenal, they took 11 shots and only created zero point 0.3 expected goals. And I worry the same thing can happen here against Newcastle, who I've said before, not only are they a great pressing team, they're one of the worst teams to face when you want to play direct. I mean, I know they lost to West Ham over the weekend, but I mean, they're so physical and so good at winning duels that they're a brute to play against. Outside of Arsenal, Newcastle has been the best defensive team in the Premier League this season, not only because of their press, but they're limiting the quality of their opponents' chances. They are allowing a non-penalty XG per shot of 0.08 in the Premier League and 0.05 in the Champions League, which is second best to only Real Madrid. So I have a feeling that this match is probably going to be very low scoring, and probably whoever wins the most duels is probably going to win this match. That'll do it for the Champions League preview. I'll be back later in the week with a preview of match week 12, 11, 12 in the Premier League, whatever match week it is, right before the international break. And stay tuned. I may have a podcast as well. Or stay tuned to my YouTube channel. I may have a video coming out here either today or tomorrow on how Chelsea completely stifled Tottenham over the weekend. So thank you all for listening. Until next time, take care.